What's up guys, this is Carter from Better Bolts, and today we're going to go over how to install a stem. So a few things that you're going to need. You're going to need a hex wrench, either a 4 or a 5 millimeter, sometimes both. It depends whether or not you have M5 or M6 hardware on your stem. You're going to need some thread locker, some anti-seize. This is a little bit optional. You don't always need to use anti-seize, but we do recommend it. And then you'll need some way to torque your bolts. So here we have a Bursman torque wrench, but you can also use a Torquey or something like that if you have another way to get to the proper torque. Then lastly, of course, you're gonna need your stem and your bars. Probably your bike would help as well. So let's go over really quick a few different styles of stems, just because there are two different ways that will change how you install it, and we're gonna go over both. So one stem, like the DD Copperhead, is going to be a equal clamping stem, meaning that you're gonna look for an equal gap between your faceplate and the stem body on the top and the bottom. Some other stems, like the Specialized Trail Stem 35, is going to be what's called a no-gap stem. So the top is going to have no gap. You will torque that all the way down first, and then the bottom will have all of the gap. This just depends on the manufacturer of the stem, so you will need to check. No matter what, if you have a no gap stem, there's going to be no gap engraved somewhere on the stem to let you know which one, whether it's the top or the bottom, needs to have no gap to it. If you don't see any engravings anywhere on the stem saying that, then it is going to be an equal gap stem. All right, so let's get into the install. So first we're gonna take this Envy stem off. Okay, so now we got the stem off of our display here, so we're ready to start installing a stem. We're gonna start here with the DD Copperhead. I've gone ahead and gotten all of the bolts taken out of it, so that is the best place to start, especially if you're installing a bolt kit like something we carry. If you're just installing the stem, you can leave the back two in loosely, but it is best to take them all out. So if you got a bolt kit from us, depending on what you got, you're either going to have the washer locked on, or in this case, we have the washer separate. Pretty simple here, each bolt's going to get a washer, so just make sure you put a washer on every single one of those bolts. Next, we're gonna wanna put the stem on the steer tube. So you can go ahead and do that before putting any bolts in. Then what you're gonna wanna do is just take one bolt. On the DD Copperhead, they are all matching. Some stems do have bolts that are different in the rear than they are in the front, so it is a good idea to take all your hardware out and match it all up just to make sure. So we just put a little dollop of Loctite on the threads here, and then we're going to take our anti-seize and just put a little bit on the back of the bolt head. Now, this is an M6 bolt, so I'm taking my 5 millimeter, and I'm just going to thread this guy in, but I'm gonna leave it loose. All right, right there. So I can still spin the stem back and forth. Then we're gonna do the exact same thing again. And throw this guy in the other side. Do the same thing, just get it snug. All right, now the easiest thing to do is to go ahead and throw on your top cap. That way your fork doesn't keep falling out of your bike. So it's not gonna do a whole lot for me here because I've got the display, and I don't have a fork, but for you that will be pretty helpful. We'll have a shot of the fork on the bike for adjustment later on. So next, what you're gonna wanna do is start putting on your faceplate. So you wanna go ahead and prep all of these bolts. Just get a little Loctite on all of them. I'm gonna go ahead and drop them on all here. And then again, with the anti-seize, you'll wanna get a little bit on every single one of those. All right. Now you're ready to start putting your faceplate on. So with this DD Copperhead stem, we don't have a top or bottom on the faceplate. What you're gonna wanna do is just go ahead and get all of the threads started on these. That will be the easiest way. And again, these are still loose back here. That makes everything a little bit easier for now. Now we're gonna just start tightening up these faceplate bolts. I like to do them all pretty evenly. That way I can keep an eye on my gap. Remember, this stem that we're doing right now is an even gap top and bottom. So you just wanna keep an eye on how the gap looks top and bottom. I like to pinch the stem how I am right now. That way I can feel the gap on the top and bottom and judge whether or not they are the same. So like to go through and get them all pretty close. And I'm just getting them snug enough that the bar doesn't spin around. Now what you can do, I went just slightly too tight. What you can do is twist your bar back and forth to try and get it perfectly centered and at the angle that you would like. I'm happy with where it's at right now. So what I'm gonna do is check and make sure my gap is even top and bottom, which it is. So we're gonna go ahead and get these a little bit tighter. Not very tight yet. We're gonna do the final torque with the torque wrench. And now that they're snug and the gap is even, we can break out the torque wrench. So on the DD Copperhead, these are M6 bolts. Most of the time, the torque spec is going to be engraved on the stem, but in this case it is not. So you will want to check with your manufacturer of the stem and just use the torque spec that they set out. We're gonna go to 6 Newton meters on this one. And you're just gonna wanna go in a crisscross pattern until your stem reaches its torque on the front. And notice the rear is still loose. Okay, now what you'll want to do is tighten your headset bolt until it's at the proper torque so that your headset is not loose. And we'll show an example of how to check. What you're going to want to do is grab your front brake and rock the bike back and forth. If you don't feel the headset bouncing back and forth, or you don't feel any play in the headset, then you have your headset bolt tight enough. If you go too tight with your headset bolt, you won't be able to turn the bars at all. Everything will bind. Once you have that at the proper tightness, what you're going to want to do is tighten these rear pinch bolts in the back of the stem just enough so that you can push on the stem and it turns, but not so loose that it just rocks back and forth. Now what you'll do is center your stem by using your wheel to see if it is straight with your stem and get everything lined up. Now all you need to do is torque it. So you're going to want to go a little bit at a time, alternating on each one. You don't want to bring one of them straight to torque right out of the gate. You want to start with one, go to the other, come back, and do this as long as it takes till you hit torque. There we go, that one hit torque. And so did that one. Now we have our DD Copperhead mounted on the display. All right, we're gonna go ahead and do a gap stem now. So I'm gonna get this one off and I will join you when we have the gap stem ready to go on. Okay, now we are ready to install our no gap stem. So here we have the Specialized Trail 35 stem. There are a few other brands, quite a few other brands that do a no gap style, but we're gonna use this one. This particular stem uses 4 M5 bolts for the front and 2 M6 bolts for the rear. So it is important to check whether or not you have different sized bolts in your stem kit. So just like the last time, we're gonna go ahead and put this on our steer tube. Imagine this is your fork here. We're gonna put this on our steer tube and we're gonna throw on our top cap. This is all without bolts installed. If we throw on our top cap, it just stops the fork from falling out of the bike. Now we're gonna throw the bolts in the rear. That way we can get it to stop from twisting so much on us. So we're gonna drop a little bit of Loctite on both of these bolts here, and we're going to give a little dab of anti-seize on the back of the bolt head. Now we're gonna throw both of these in the stem and just get them tight enough to be snug. That way the fork doesn't twist around on us. Now we are ready to throw on our faceplate. So an important note with the faceplate, it's going to have bottom engraved right there. Obviously that's going to go to the bottom. And then on the side, it's going to have no gap at the top and gap on the bottom. That is going to show us that we have no gap at the top of this stem and then a gap at the bottom. So now we're going to prep our bolts. We're gonna put a little dollop of Loctite on all of them. And then we're going to give a little bit of anti-seize on the backs of all these bolt heads. All right, now with bottom going to the bottom, we're going to hand thread all of these bolts into the stem. Now, since we know that there's going to be no gap at the top, we can thread all of these top bolts all the way in. And we're just going to get them snug enough so that we can turn the bar, but it's not completely loose. So now we can change our angle and get everything all centered. Once we like where it's at, we're going to torque the top bolts first. So this stem has it engraved on the side, 6 Newton meters for these faceplate bolts. So these ones we can just go all the way to torque, top and bottom. Right there. And now that we have the top tightened all the way and the bottom is completely loose, that gives us our no gap at the top. So now what we're going to do is just torque these bottom bolts. So you can spin them down. Perfect. Now that is the faceplate installed. So what you're going to want to do is center your stem over your wheel, make sure everything's in a straight line. Tighten your headset bolt until it's at the proper torque so that your headset is not loose. And we'll show an example of how to check. What you're going to want to do is grab your front brake and rock the bike back and forth. If you don't feel the headset bouncing back and forth, or you don't feel any play in the headset, then you have your headset bolt tight enough. If you go too tight with your headset bolt, you won't be able to turn the bars at all. Everything will bind. And then we're going to tighten these rear bolts here. So these are going to be a 5mm hex, and it is engraved here on the stem 8 Newton meters. So I'm going to go up to 8 Newton meters, and I'm going to alternate getting these just a little bit tighter, one at a time. I'm not bringing one all the way to torque. I'm going to go back and forth a couple times, and now I'm going to bring them all the way up. And there we go. Now we have our Specialized 35 no gap stem installed. Thanks for joining us. Catch us on the next one.